No mai, haere mai, ki te putia mātua, mō tō mātou hui o he whaka mātoto e te pūnaha moni arohi, ko Peter Northcote tōko ingoa. Good evening, welcome to the Reserve Bank and to this briefing on the Community Cash Service Trials. My name's Peter Northcote and with me is Chris Nelson, who's Program Manager for the Community Cash Service Trials. Maia e te tipua, maia e te tahito, maia e te kahui o ngā ariki, maia e te kahui o ngā ariki, maia e tawhiwhi atu ki atu, maia e tawhiwhi atu ki Arongo, maia e tawhiwhi atu ki Atani, homia e hui e Tahikie. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. This briefing, as you'll have seen, is being recorded and a link to the recording will be added to our guest listing tomorrow, along with a copy of these slides and the Q&A from this evening. We'd ask you to use the Q&A function that should be visible if you're using a PC or a tablet to ask questions during tonight's presentation. If you're on a phone, you may not see the Q&A function. In that case, please use the chat and we'll be happy to take your questions that way. Chris and I are being assisted by our colleague Claire, so she might issue directions or draw our attentions to stuff from off screen, should we not be paying attention to the right things as we go along. So what are we aiming to do in this briefing? We're going to cover off why we're running these trials, what they're going to look like on the ground, who's involved, and what all the different parties will be doing. Then we'll stop for a bit of a Q&A on the background to the trials and what they look like before Chris takes us through the application process. When is this happening? How do we apply? And then we'll have a second Q&A looking at the application process. So why are we doing this? The Reserve Bank is fundamentally committed to cash. We know, and we've been on a journey since 2017 looking at the future of cash. We know it's about the autonomy. It gives us the privacy, the backup when things go wrong with electronic payments, and it gives us a choice. We know that cash is about community and whānau, treating, trading, and so on. And we also know that for a significant minority of the population, cash is essential to the way they live their lives, either through necessity or choice. We also know that cash is incredibly important as central bank money, as a sign of what money is worth. Most of the money that you and I use is private money sitting in a bank account. Central bank money, cash, provides a value anchor to that, and it helps provide confidence in both the banking system and in the way that we go about our daily lives. We know what a dollar is worth. So why are we doing this work? Well, retailers are the heart of the cash system in communities, and that's become increasingly so as commercial banks have withdrawn branches, operating hours, rationalising ATM fleets and the like. And we know that it's become harder for retailers, particularly in rural New Zealand, to meet their cash needs. And that's about being able to bank your surplus cash, being able to obtain a float when you need it without having to drive for miles to a branch that isn't as open for the same number of hours as it once was. We want to avoid a downward spiral of cash acceptance, availability, and use, because that will be to the detriment of individuals and to communities. So we're proposing to trial some things in about 6 to 10 towns, probably in a couple of regions, and maybe even involving a control town for our research purposes. So what are we trialing? Well, there'll be 3 solutions that we'll be looking to try out in different places, plus 1 add-on, and that's the cash out scheme. So what are the 3 solutions? 2 of the solutions involve what we call community cash depots. That's where at a suitable place within a community, we'll place some machinery. That will be either a smart ATM, which is like an ATM that most people would be familiar with, except this will have the addition of a coin facility, both to receive and dispense coin. Or the other machinery option will be what's called a smart safe. This involves sort of a membership type access. It allows you to deposit cash and to get immediate value for it. It also would allow you to pick up change bags which have been pre-prepared to order. There'd also be an associated coin machinery with that option as well. So 2 options for a cash depot. The third option is for sort of a party plan individual van service where we would negotiate a bulk rate and individual retailers would then be able to free to sign up for a subsidised door-to-door security van service to look after their banking needs. Alongside those 3 solutions would be the option for retailers in the town to join a cash out scheme. Now, when you think about it, if you go in and you get cash out, that retailer is actually doing work for your bank. And we see it as appropriate that perhaps retailers are remunerated for doing that favour for the bank. And in the trials, we'll be picking up that cost. Now, to join that, retailers will need to agree to give cash outs with or without purchase, and to ensure that they can readily meet cash out requirements that are reasonable and proportionate to the scale and scope of the business. So that's what we're planning to try. Now, who are the participants in this? First up, ourselves, participating towns, potentially some of you, retailers and others, cash service providers, independent researcher, and of course the people that live in our towns. And I'll just take us briefly through what the expectations of each of those parties will be. First up, us. What are we doing? Well, we'll be wanting to build some relationships, and this is why we're really looking for applicant towns, so that we get an entree to a town that means that we meet the people that matter in terms of the leadership of that town, from council, from iwi, from retail land, from significant community organisations, as well as the retailer community. We want to work with the community through your introductions to help explain and implement the trials. We'll work with service providers to put in place a local cash depot or security van service, and I'll talk more about that shortly. We'll offer those cash out scheme contracts to retailers and other similar services who might deal in cash to join that scheme. We'll be wanting to collect data and observe what's going on in terms of how cash is used in the town using an independent researcher, and I'll cover them off shortly too. And we'll want to keep in touch with the town to see, in general terms, how is it going? Are there any issues and so on? And provide any feedback on the way that we're conducting the trial or any issues that might arise. And also, we want to give feedback, right? So research reports at appropriate time in the trials, and certainly at the end, sharing about how things have gone. What are the expectations on towns? And we know that this will obviously be of concern to many of you. Well, we just want some context first up from yourself as the applicant, and maybe some introduction to some of the endorsers that we'll be looking for to see in an application, and with the retail community. Just help connect us, help explain it, encourage retailer participation. Help us find your stakeholders and others who might be useful for our researchers to talk to, and just meet up with us from time to time and let us know how you see the trial going from your point of view. This is a research trial, so we're going to go to great lengths not to skew the research by overhyping it, by telling people to use the services and those sorts of things. And equally, we'll be looking for other stakeholders to talk to us first before releasing any public statements or other comms which would have the potential to unduly influence cash use in the town. That's not to stop free speech. It's just a matter of fact that we don't want to skew our research in any way. So retailers in your town, what would they be doing? Well, they have the opportunity to use the local cash depot or subsidised van service. It's not compulsory that everyone joins and uses that, but obviously we're looking to have good support in a town. If it's a smart ATM service, they'll pretty much access that as they would access a smart ATM today. If it's a smart safe or a security van service, then there'll be a separate contract between them and the supplier so that they sign on to that service. And they'd also have that opportunity to join the cash out scheme where they'll be paid a fee for being readily able to make reasonable cash out requests. And as part of that, retailers would obviously need to agree to us to collect the data from the places which can tell us how much they're doing in terms of cash out so we can pay them. Cash service providers. Now, there's two main types of cash service providers we'll be working with. First up, what's called the cash and transit industry. Let's call them the security van services, who both hump and dump cash, but they also have back office cash processing and banking functions. And the second main type of cash service provider are the equipment providers. So those that provide either the ATMs or the smart safe equipment as well as the coin machinery. So we'll be working directly with the cash depot providers and the security van services, and we'll also be working with the point of sale data providers, the people that process transactions on behalf of retailers so we can identify the cash outs, and also with our own security consultants who'll provide advice during the final stages of town selection and assurance on the security aspects of our cash service providers' delivery. What will the town individuals do? Whatever they like. But hopefully shopping local, paying the way they want, finding it easy to get and spend cash if that's what they want to do. As I said earlier, we'll be doing low-key communications. We'll likely support retailers with training resources and cash out point of sale material if wanted. But our primary concern is to preserve the research value of the trials. So we won't be promoting individuals' use of the services beyond awareness that it's available in the town. Now, we're contracting an independent research company to work closely with the communities and the people that a town would introduce us to. They'll have a separate ethics and consent frameworks for their work. They'll be meeting with people, conducting surveys, analysing some of the data we collect. They'll be doing a lot of listening. They'll be feeding some of that back in terms of their preliminary findings, and then they'll be writing up reports, which, in an appropriate time, we'll share fully as part of our reciprocity for the privilege of working in the towns that we do. So that's an overview of what the trials are about and so on. I'm just going to check now if we've got any questions. We'll just wait for a pause to see if there's any that come in. Yes, I can see we've got one. Let's bring that up on our screen. Okay. Right. Sure. Tyrone's just asked what thought has been given to the security risk of having cash in the till to offer the cash out service. In general, we don't see retailers doing anything different to what they do today. And we wouldn't be expecting retailers who might typically deal in $20 transactions to have $2,000 on cash on hand or to meet a $500 cash out request. So one of the things that we're clear about is ensuring that there's some proportionality in terms of the expectation on retailers for the scheme. Retailers will still be getting cash. they'll still be banking cash, they'll still be receiving cash in payment, they'll still be giving change, and in all likelihood, they probably give cash outs now, and they'll continue to do that. But one of the aspects that would be covered off in the participation agreement will be some reminders about that. And as part of the material that we deliver, we'd anticipate sharing some good practice about cash handling, both from a security point of view and also from the our favourites around it in identifying that cash is genuine and of a good enough standard to give out again rather than to bank. Are there types of retail that will be preferred? Chris, did you want to pick this one up?
Sure. Regarding retailers, we are just working through what our eligibility criteria is for retail and merchants. But I can't say at this point in time that we have chosen to select any particular type of retail store, but we are going through that process at the moment. We'll be releasing more information about the type of retailers we'll be working with closer to the time that we will start the trials.
Thanks. There's good questions coming in. Some of these we may leave until the end of Chris's section because they relate specifically to the application process. But I'll just, we could, we'll deal with that one later. How will it be communicated to locals about the cash out available at their locations? We believe that this is, well, coming back to what we were saying earlier about it being not about influencing behaviour, we would certainly be announcing that XYZ towns are in the trial and this is the types of stuff that it's available. We would offer point of sale material that can be used in stores, but we don't really want to have signage up that's saying, come get your cash here, because that raises all sorts of other problems. What the cash out scheme is doing is just reducing the barriers to people individuals who would like to get some cash, perhaps in smaller quantities than you typically get from an ATM. You want some coins for the pocket money or the sausage sizzle, rather than the $50 that an ATM might typically give you. So we would make some discrete point of sale material together, saying this store offers cash outs with a smile or whatever that might be. But it's not about saying, come get your cash here. It's about removing the barriers or retailers who might be disinclined to offer cash out without purchase, or who might manage their cash on hand a little bit more narrowly than they might if they were a member of a scheme which would see them paid for offering cash outs. Thanks very much. There's some really good questions that relate to the application process. So I'm assuming that, Kim, that your question about floats is about, can other retailers get cash outs from other retailers? Well, we know that in towns, and there's good media coverage of this at the minute, in some towns retailers club together and almost pool change, or somebody might go and get a larger float which is then broken down and so on as a way of doing it. The cash out scheme will be available to anyone who wants to take cash out, but bear in mind we also hope to have in place a more concrete service for them by way of either the smart ATM or the smart safe, where they could both deposit and pick up their change. How many cash service providers will be part of the trial, and what process is involved in deciding who will participate? I'll hand that to Chris.
Yeah, sure. So the market in New Zealand is quite small for cash depot or cash service providers. So we're just working through a process at the moment to work through and onboard some suppliers that are actually existing in the market at the moment. And we will work with those providers and our shortlisted cash trial towns to configure a number of towns with these services, with the appropriate services in each town, and we'll stage those out. But yeah, we're still working through the process of onboarding those cash suppliers, but there are not a lot of them in New Zealand.
Thanks very much, Chris. And maybe this is time to move on and to delve into the application process, and then we'll come back to those other questions that we have not addressed already.
Thanks, Peter. I'm just going to roughly run through the process of making an application. The first thing we need to understand is the key dates. So we've released the RFP recently. We're running the webinar tonight, and we would really like a notification from parties intending to respond to the RFP to let us know by the 19th of May. Now, that's not mandatory. You don't have to do that if you do not wish to. If you notify us as well, it doesn't mean that you're obligated to respond to us. What we want to do is just understand the amount of interest and the likely amount of applications that we'll receive, and that really just helps us scale up how we manage that here. So if you do have questions, please try and get them in by Wednesday the 22nd next week, and we will endeavour to respond to all of those questions by the 27th of May. You can ask more questions, however, we would prefer it if they were just of a technical nature around uploading and submitting your application. The applications do close on the 11th of June, and we are looking to run an evaluation process and a shortlist between June and July, with a view to doing final town selection in August, and then commissioning services with cash depot providers and merchants between September and February 25. And we are looking at running the research out to early 2026. So eligibility is pretty important for anyone considering an application, but you do need to be, your town will need to be within 1 to 10,000. You will need to have or be able to demonstrate that you have under 40 hours of cash banking services in your town. And we're not looking to deploy services into towns where there is a New Zealand Banking Association banking hub. The selection process at a glance is, I suppose we're really looking at only 10 to 12 towns, ideally, which will include some backup towns. And we will endeavour to work with the project team and the evaluation team to configure, I suppose, configure options around cash service providers and what the ideal configuration might look like for approvals. Then we'll also begin to work through any contracts that we may need to do with cash service providers and and retailers as well. So there is a bit of a, it's a competition. We've got some criteria for the shortlisting. we're looking at a 5-point scale, and we've tried to keep this reasonably simple to submit an application. But we're really interested in your cash story in the town, and that's weighted appropriately. We're interested in your enthusiasm and willingness to participate in the trials. And I suppose, what sort of difficulties or disadvantages you have in accessing bank provided cash services. So we are really interested in your story. And if you can tell us that in your application in detail, that would be great. So we're also wanting to understand if you have potential sites for the cash depots or services. And we want to know a little bit about what your thoughts are on the town from a security profile perspective. We're not expecting any in-depth kind of responses in that space, but if you could just talk to that would be really useful. We'll come back to you if we require any clarification or further information. We will scale the evaluation process based on the number of applications that we receive as well. And one important thing to consider is while some towns that we may want to include for strategic reasons, i.e. clustering, project cost, working to the research plan, etc. Some of those, or a town or two, may actually be shortlisted during that process as well. So the final selection, I did talk to it a bit earlier, but we will focus on, after shortlisting, project considerations, feasibility, cost. We'll actually just work with some of those solutions with shortlisted towns, and then we'll work out what a final selection will look like. We will want to understand some things around final selection, which is the type of service models that we can deploy in your town, how efficient it will be from a project management perspective. We are working within some budget constraints here, but we also want to understand the research from potentially a clustering perspective. And there may be some other project and strategic considerations that come into play during this process. Okay, approaching your town's application. We do have some in the application process itself. We're really interested in the town appetite to be in the trials. So if you could work with your town leadership across some of the cohorts that we've talked about before, and build some good, strong endorsement for your application. Let us know if you're going to apply. We've got the dates there, and the process to do that is in the application pack, but it's essentially via GETS. Review the application form, do some planning, let us know if you've got any questions. We will theme those questions up and respond back by the due date. We may provide some addendums earlier if we think the questions are, require that. We'd also like you to let us know if there's any confidential information in those questions, because we may come back to you and just clarify how we would respond to a more public arena there. And fill in the forms, submit your application on GETS before the deadline. My advice would be to submit those applications well before the deadline if you can. If you have any issues providing or working with GETS, we've got some information in the application pack around where you can get some support. But yeah, that's the other thing I want to talk to is probity. If what probity is we've got an independent advisor working with the project team and the evaluation team to ensure that it's a fair process. But if you do have any concerns, our probity advisor details are in the application pack.
Thanks very much, Chris. So we've got some questions from earlier, which we can, which related to the section, and then we'll just see what else has come in over the last few minutes while Chris has been talking. I just want to pick up on Tyrone's question of earlier. Here's something we prepared earlier for this, because it is security, health and safety are obviously relevant to when we're talking about cash and potential for retail crime and so on. And just to expand on my answer from earlier, retailers effectively would have no change to their existing security, health and safety responsibilities. As I said earlier, they're essentially doing the same as before, but to the extent that their volume may change, that may give them cause to review some of their practices and security measures, and will ensure that there's some thought starters for 10 available for that. When it comes to the cash depots themselves, we are contracting that work to the specialists in terms of the cash service providers who work in this type of risk assessment and installation all the time. In terms of our engagement of them, we'll have our own security consultants looking over the shoulder in terms of confirming that their risk assessment processes and the way they deal with it is appropriate. And the security van services obviously also deal in this type of activity every day. A lot of what the trials are doing is just doing stuff that already happens, but it's been organised and paid for by people other than a commercial bank. So that's an important thing in terms of understanding where the novelty is or isn't in what we're doing here. And as you'll have seen from the different parties involved and how they'll be involved on a contractual or other basis, there's a number of places where it will be clear between the parties, who's responsible for what in that area. So let's move on up through the questions. This one here, within a district, is it possible to make multiple applications? We have a few towns within our districts and we'd be keen to forward an application for multiple towns. Absolutely. You can, but we would need an application form for each town. They can all be uploaded together. There's flexibility in terms of how many documents and so on you can upload in one Get submission. No problem with them coming together. No problem if you decide that you're going to cut and paste. But as long as that richness of the town story comes out and how that relates. What kind of space is required for the smart ATM? Chris, did you want to talk with that, or do you want me to pick it up?
Yeah, maybe if you pick it up, but just maybe we could talk to the fact that we are looking at coin dispensing as well. Yeah. So it's probably 2 units.
Yeah. So the equipment that goes in obviously would need to be in a hardened retail space, and some stores, because of nature of what they sell, may already sort of meet those basic requirements. We don't expect you to, in your application, say that we've got XYZ hardware and they're the perfect place for this, and so on. That's work for our cash service providers to do with a shortlisted town, or potentially part as the final part of shortlisting to confirm that there is a suitable site. What we're really looking for at this stage is that there's 1 or 2 candidates in the town and the people that have control of those premises are comfortable with the idea of that being explored. We don't need anything signed up at this stage. We don't need, sort of measure ups and full security audits. We just need to know that there's a place that potentially could host equipment, and as part of that negotiation, which the cash service provider would do on our behalf, there is the potential to look at what enhancements might need to be funded, reasonable enhancements. It's not like we're about to, redecorate, paint, and and restock the shelves for that outfit. But some stuff may be reasonable to get it to a standard where that can happen, and also. We're not looking for a free ride there. Obviously, if there is some space that's available free of charge, well, that would be great. But equally, we're open to the fact that we're working with businesses, and businesses, if they're giving up floor space for something like a smart ATM, are potentially giving up space where they could be, presenting merchandise for sale. So, we're all that sort of stuff is up for discussion. Chris, Sam was asking, you've identified criteria for a town in terms of size and over-the-counter banking services. What other aspects would make a town attractive to you as part of the trial?
Oh, there's lots of things, but I think the scoring criteria or the evaluation criteria really tells the story. So I would advise focusing on the first set of questions around the cash story, particularly around why your town wants to participate in the trials and the sorts of solutions you're interested in question A. And likewise in question B and C, I would be focusing on those questions. And we are open to the kind of sorts of cash stories that you have in your town. So yeah, really looking forward to the applications and stories. The infrastructure side of things, I would just put in what you can. We'll review that and consider that as part of the evaluation. But yeah, I think the advice is really to focus on the cash story. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks. We've got I can see two more questions, which we'll come to shortly, but this is really an invitation. If there's something else you want to ask, please get that in the Q&A now, and go from there. And just checking, do we have anything in the chat channel at all? We're all good. So the last two questions kind of relate to the what next after the trials. How long is the trial, and what would happen to equipment installed once it is finished? And if the trial is successful, will the initiatives be available in the future to towns that are smaller than 1,000? What we can say at this stage is that we have a research horizon and some project constraints which would mean that the research needs to wind up about February 26. What happens after that is a matter for the policy work that will be picking up the research from the trials and saying what happens next. Regardless, there'll be a transition of some sort. If someone else wants to come in the market and say we want to pick this up, then we would be opening to talk transition. Or there might be a policy decision that says, actually, this has worked great guns, this needs to be rolled out more fully and wider. And to the second question about the population thing is, would the initiatives be available to towns smaller than 1,000 people? There's no reason to say that wouldn't be the case, nor can we say it would be. The point of this research is to say, is to test whether or not these types of initiatives make a difference. And if that answer is yes, then is there broader commitment to implementing them, and what would implementation on a broader scale, whether that's nationally in a rural sense, or potentially some of those initiatives could even have relevance in a more urban setting. That's all policy work that would follow, informed by what the research from the trials tell us. Chris, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you've summed that up perfectly, Peter.
Thanks. Well, people, that brings us to the end of the questions. I'll just pause a minute in case there's any other that comes through. What we will be doing is tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, we'll have a link to this video available, so you can share that more broadly with other stakeholders, or those that couldn't make it this evening are able to join in or catch up. We'll also take the Q&As and provide a bulleted response, which hopefully matches the response we've given you tonight, but maybe there's something we missed or whatever, and we'll add that in there. We'll take the names out from that and just make that available as a general Q&A on the Get site as well. Nothing else has come in? Well, I'll close us then. Thank you very much for your time, for your interest in our trials. I hope you see it to be as an exciting piece of work as we do. The future of money and cash is incredibly important to the bank. We've got this cash trials project in work. You may have in the works. We're also consulting on whether or not Aotearoa needs a digital equivalent of cash to circulate alongside that. And I urge you to check out our digital cash consultation as well. But certainly this team with you tonight is very much in the analog style. We believe that vinyl reigns supreme, and that digital stuff, no. We want to deliver cash in the way in which New Zealanders want to use it, access it, and we want to make it work for all the different contexts that New Zealanders want to use it within. And we in particular want to deal with some of the issues which rural New Zealand and rural New Zealand retailers find themselves when it comes to dealing with cash. Unuhia, ki te uru tapu nui, kia watia, kia mama, tina ko te tinana te wairua I te ara takatu. Koia rā e rongo whakaria aki ki ronga, tuturu whaka maua kia tina, kina huie taikike. Good evening.